Hello and welcome to GC's book club. Leaving Las Vegas has been the last book. This will be the last stream for a little while, I think, at least in terms of the book club, because, well, no one's watching, so whatever. Yeah, Leaving Las Vegas, I mean, I've had this one on my radar for quite a long time, I suppose. It was John O'Brien's Brian's only novel to be published in his lifetime, most likely because a couple of weeks after signing away the film rights, he killed himself. So I believe there was a couple more published posthumously, which is pretty par for the course when it comes to dead authors, I suppose. But I have to admit, reading the book made me somewhat reluctant to be drinking whilst talking about it, but I will overlook that. Mainly because, the depiction of alcoholism in this is probably the most savage I've ever read, actually. But we'll probably get more into that as it goes on. Leaving Las Vegas, I don't know whether you've seen the film. I have, but it was a number of years ago. And I suppose the first thing I was a bit taken aback by was the fact that we start the story with Sarah. Basically, she's like the prostitute figure from the film, obviously, but we're following her story at the beginning, and I was a little bit perplexed by that. But at the same time, I kind of welcomed it because it was like, okay, it's interesting, mainly because in the film, the character of Ben, which is played by Nicolas Cage, is obviously the protagonist, really, whereas in this it kind of blended it, so they're kind of both the protagonists in a sense. And I suppose you would guess that they're going to cross paths, given the fact that we start off with Sarah and she's kind of just living in Vegas, tricking, what she kind of refers to it, hooking basically, but it's like finding her tricks. And I was a bit taken aback by the fact that it had the brutal gang rape sodomy scene, which is quite later in the film. It happens really early on in the book, and so I was a bit like, okay. And I was even more kind of surprised by how nonchalant Sarah acts after it, like as if it was just, I mean, I suppose it is collateral damage for her type of profession, but at the same time, it did feel a little bit, I don't know, indistinct, I suppose. But I will also get onto that later when I'm talking a bit more about the characterization. But I don't really have too much to add in terms of like the beginning, because it is just kind of introducing her day-to-day kind of existence. And yeah, you kind of get the drill after a while. Probably the most fitting words. So yeah, she lives in Vegas. She does have an apartment there. She used to have a pimp. This character does come into it at some point, but it's more about how she just finds her clients, does a day-to-day kind of thing. It's all very almost run-of-the-mill, kind of monotonous. And I did notice when I was reading the synopsis just before going live, it's got, I don't know why that's coming up. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, it says Leaving Las Vegas, the first novel by John O'Brien, is a disturbing and emotionally wrenching story of a woman who embraces life and a man who rejects it. Sarah, a prostitute, and Ben, an alcoholic, stumble together and discover in each other a respite from their unforgiving lives. A testimony to the raw talent of its young author, Leaving Las Vegas is a compelling story of unconditional love between two disenfranchised and lost souls, an overlooked American classic. Yeah, I mean, I can sort of agree with that assertion in terms of like, she is a bit more up and go on a day-to-day type of thing, but given her profession and what she's no doubt been exposed to and a victim of, you kind of feel like, to me, I don't want to get onto this too early, but yeah, as a character, I couldn't really see her as fully rounded in that regard. It does still work within the novel, but yeah, we'll get to that later. So it's told in 4 parts, and each part is kind of split by it names like pears and fucking plums and all of that, and then yeah, you kind of clock like it's talking about a slot wheel kind of thing, you know, because we're in Vegas. It's kind of like a little nod to that. I don't think there's any other relevance aside from that. But then so we get kind of Sarah's story and what happens to her, how she kind of deals with that. Apparently getting beaten up isn't really, you know, too unfamiliar to her, and how she tries to recuperate, how she still goes out to find new Johns even when her face is bruised and all this type of stuff, and just how people kind of act with her. I think one of the strongest elements of the piece is that I really did feel like I was in Vegas and LA when we're there, but it's mostly in Vegas that the whole thing is told. And yeah, there's just this almost like obviously it's like the city of sleaze anyway, but in a lot of ways I kind of felt like we were really in the subterranean underbelly. Like, so you have the sleaze as the main kind of attraction, but it's got the glitz and the glamour. With her kind of story, she's actually looking for the back streets and the real kind of bums and drug addicts and, you know, gambling aholics and obviously alcoholics and all of that type of stuff. It's seedy as fuck. Like it's one of the most depressing novels I think I might have ever read, if I'm honest. Like, there were moments where I was just like, damn, this is grim. This is like but there was something poetic in it, I thought, at times. And then we get to Ben's story. I think he's kind of recently been fired. He was at some kind of office job. It's pretty indeterminate, like what he actually did for a living, but you get an impression it was in some sort of office. And they kept him on for as long as they could. They were actually pretty good with him, and then they give him a nice severance package to try and sort his life out, because yeah, he's, you know, fallen to the bottle pretty damn hard. And so we kind of follow him around, and he's stumble bumming his way through life. He's falling over, he's drinking relentlessly. Like, it's almost impressive in some ways, because you're kind of like, damn, this guy literally just doesn't stop. Like, and it's not, you know, having a beer was like a kind of rarity. It's mostly gin, vodka, turkey, which is some whiskey, like, and he's just drinking it in the shower. He drinks it when he's taking a dump. He drinks it when he's, you know, just woken up. He's like, he doesn't really eat anything. I think because he can't even hold it down. Like, he's at this such a severe stage of alcoholism. It's pretty difficult to even comprehend at some points, because it's kind of like that. Like, I don't know, like, there's the level of like an alcoholic and someone who does it a lot, and then his level is like somewhere totally gone, like where you can't even really fathom how he's, you know, getting by. And he has this kind of abandon to him, which is again somewhat impressive. So he's kind of vowed to get rid of all of his possessions, pawn all the stuff he can, take the 10 G's he got from his job, which I thought was a little bit convenient as a plot point, if I'm honest, because it was just like, oh, I need an excuse why he could suddenly just decide to drink himself to death. Well, let me know if it's too loud. I can turn it down a bit. And yeah, so that's basically what happens in the second section. He's just deciding to go down to Vegas, and the main reason seemed to be that he could access booze 24/7, because one of his main concerns is when he runs out of liquor, even though he's got like 5 bottles at home at all times, his drinking's at a level where, well, probably because he falls over and, you know, smashes bottles, he never really knows when he wakes up if he's going to have enough and all this type of stuff. So his dependence on it is, yeah, it's out there. And yeah, Vegas seems to be the perfect location to not only remain somewhat anonymous, but also just have access to his drug whenever he wants it, kind of thing. And as long as he's got a bit of cash to do it, then he's totally fine. He's a little bit lucky he doesn't get robbed, I have to admit, at certain moments, because you kind of think he would be a prime target for, you know, certain thieves and con artists and whatnot. But then the third section kind of it goes back to Sarah, but it's more to do with her pimp Al, who's some guy from Oman, I think it was. But he can't, you know, he's really taken to the kind of capitalist American lifestyle and all that. And yeah, Sarah used to be one of his girls. He used to have like quite a big posse. He was, you know, the big shit basically. But she eventually runs away from this guy. So you kind of know that he's a piece of shit, to be honest. But okay, Slim, cool. And yeah, he kind of basically invites himself back into her life, and it becomes quite uncomfortable, because you do realise that for probably the first time, Sarah actually shows a kind of side of her personality that is fearful and doesn't know how to kind of act, even though she's done these tricks and whatnot for fuck knows how many years. With this particular guy, she knows he is volatile and threatening, basically. And due to, I suppose, what happened to her in the first section, she's a bit more on edge. So it's there are elements where it kind of like has a correlation and a connection to later events, but they're a little bit brushed over, I would say. And overall, I found the character of Al and his ending to kind of be a little bit redundant. I didn't actually see much need for it to be in there. It did give a good parallel, I suppose, where when he turns up and he starts acting like he's basically her pimp again, and that, you know, he owns her and all this type of stuff, I suppose it's like history catching up with her a little bit. But at the same time, the parallel between their relationship and the one she's going to have with Ben once it actually reaches it is quite nicely, you know, put against one another. And it did definitely add to the intimacy that and connection that Ben and Sarah certainly felt. It just takes a little while to get there, I kind of found. I mean, it's not as if it's displeasurable to read. It's actually oddly comforting in some ways. I kind of found it to be... This could have been to do with the prose. It could have been to do with just the kind of world building and stuff like that. Like you really did feel like you were almost like a passenger driving from LA down to Vegas in that kind of Californian environment, and the heat of the place, the kind of general atmosphere, people's attitudes to one another. This kind of, the Americanism is, well, absolutely very high. It feels like a true Americana kind of classic in a lot of ways. And yeah, so I mean, there might be moments in it where I was a bit curious as to the real reason for it to be there, but at the same time, yeah, my nitpicks were probably with the character of Al. I guess he made a decent side character and he did add a little bit of drama, but the ending he got, I thought, was just a bit subpar, if I'm honest. It didn't feel like I don't know, neither a kind of conclusion nor what do you call it, closure for Sarah. It was a little bit, because she's kind of seen this once high and mighty man at his very lowest, because he's basically lost everything, and he's like, the power he once had is all gone and everyone's abandoned him, and he's basically like a black sheep kind of thing. And oddly enough, I think Sarah and her independence has triumphed in the end, despite the fact that she's still doing the very same thing that she did when she was owned by him, kind of thing. Those things made it quite nice, but his ending for me was a bit flat. I don't know. And then yeah, by the time we get to like the third that's when Ben and Sarah kind of cross paths, because obviously when he's down there and he's like, oh, I'm gonna fucking drink myself to death, I might as well try and get some pussy at the same time. And he's got this kind of like, he's got almost a penchant for like the most debauched types of hookers and all of that kind of stuff, which I guess is pretty apt given like the depths of depravity that he and Sarah both seem very drawn to. It's almost like I think they find a glory in the grotesque almost. That's kind of how I felt with the novel, because you don't get any backstory really, not in terms of like when it comes to Ben, like why or what led him to become an alcoholic. I kind of feel like it's almost beside the point. It's not really something that you question too much, but I did feel like it didn't really give us anything. You know, there was a little bit when he was about 15, which he recalls, where he does go to a cat house and he's wanting to try and get laid, and he kind of embarrasses himself because he doesn't have enough money, and then he tries to get his money back and he, you know, gets his ass handed to him. But he kind of confesses then that he almost feels some strange envy for people who live in this very wretched side of the world, as if he feels a kinship to it almost. So, and now I suppose in terms of like the types of people that we're destined to be, there is a nihilistic somewhat truth to it. There was one line I thought in it was actually really juicy about even Camus couldn't withstand this type of absurdity or something like that. It was like a really nice kind of line. I was like, yeah, that was good. And there was quite a few of those in there. And yeah, really, I mean, the main strength of the novel is when Sarah and Ben make a kind of a somewhat of a pact. They kind of become lovers, but they're lovers who don't have sex, you know, because Ben is unable pretty much 98% of the time. Even though Sarah is more, she seems keen to do it, but at the same time she's almost relaxed at the same time of not having that kind of, not exactly pressure, but at the same time it really wasn't about that with them. It was, I actually thought their relationship was almost quite childlike in a lot of ways. You could also read it as a sort of mother to her needy little boy in a sense, or at least desperate, ill little boy, because I mean the as far as it goes sexually, she just gives him a kind of half blowjob at one point, and then she tosses him off at one point as well. So it's always her seeing to his needs. Not to get too Freudian about it, but it did, to me it felt like their intimacy was almost like that childlike wonder that they once possessed, that kind of intrigue and curiosity, and mainly because they just saw each other. And these parts, I don't know whether it was because the lead up to it was a little bit strenuous, and once you get there it kind of like makes you feel that much more poignant about it, but it was really delicate, I thought, and quite beautifully done. And they enter into what is essentially a very much doomed from the start relationship, but they're almost totally content with that, and they make this pact of basically saying, well, I'm going to carry on doing this, and if you want to carry on doing that, then that's fine, but we can't ever complain about it to the other, or we can't show concern, we can't like try and recommend one or the other and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I think even from the beginning, you know that it's going to have its problems. I thought it dealt with the final kind of showdown issue really well. I liked it in the end. I questioned it at the beginning, mainly because I thought Ben is a piece of shit for doing this. But Sarah invites him to actually stay at her house, despite the fact that that Al character is back. So once Sarah plucks up enough courage, she goes to visit Al again, tried to circumvent him coming to her, and at that point I don't know, he just seems very resigned to her just going off, and she basically just says, fuck off, like, you know, we're done. I don't want to ever see you again. And then he just says, oh, I need to get out of town anyway, kind of thing. And it just all feels a little bit like, was that it? Like, I expected a bit more from that. But fine, it was kind of resolved. And then once Ben is living with Sarah, they try to like play the couple. They go out for dinner, or they go for a drink somewhere, they go to the casino, and it's basically then Ben will wake up and Sarah will tell him what actually happened, you know, because he can't remember, he blacks out and all this kind of stuff. And that is essentially the whole novel, really. I mean, the bit that I was going to mention was Sarah goes tricking one night. She tells him that she's going to do this, and then it's all kind of fine. But while she's out doing her job, kind of thing, Ben goes out and he goes and gets shit-faced, and then he gets a bit horny at this moment. But instead of like waiting for Sarah to come back, he actually calls a prostitute and gets her to come to their place. And so Sarah walks in after a night, and that's when it's a bit, that's kind of like the boundary that's been overstepped. And when I first was reading this, I was just kind of thinking like, man, this guy is a pure, like, he just doesn't give a shit. And it's like the ultimate fuck you to not only never fuck the prostitute girlfriend that you've acquired, but then hire a different one just to kind of rub it in her face. But then afterwards, I kind of realised that the reason he did that was because he needed to get rid of her, because he wanted to go for his final, you know, campaign down drinking himself to death. Because afterwards it's been like 12 days and he's just been cooped up in his hotel room drinking the whole time. And she visits him, and like he's at that stage where he can barely even like lift the bottle. He can't get up, kind of thing, without feeling super nauseous. It's like, it's almost difficult to even describe, I would imagine, because it's like everything's painful, and it's like the alcohol. You could, if you have like a visual sense, it's almost like it's so much in his system that, yeah, the thought of a logical thought process is almost inconceivable, you know. And yeah, and then he passes, and that's it, essentially. I mean, then she goes home and lies in her bed in the dark, kind of thing. It's as I said, pretty damn depressing, to be honest. But there are moments to it. I mean, there's things almost admirable about both of them as characters. I would say possibly Ben more, mainly because he knows who he is, and he knows what his issue is, and he knows he wants to die, and he knows how he wants to die. So it's almost like that kind of thing of like, well, he knows what the thing is that's going to kill him, and he's totally fine with that, in a sense. Or his addiction to it has become so cemented that the only way to defeat it is to allow him to take him. And though obviously there's a kind of tragedy behind all of that, at the same time, I don't know, I almost felt like a kind of a courage to it in a weird way. Whereas, you know, you look at it and it's pretty horrifying, but at the same sense, it's like not many people have that kind of conviction. Though having said that, you could also argue that his whole, you know, campaign, with if you want to call it that, or his whole journey, is basically just a suicide. Like, it's a very elongated one where he's just going further and further down to the depths of the bottle, pretty much, and he's just waiting for the time that his heart stops, basically. And I suppose what I think makes it beautiful is their connection. Like, there's some like little thing that comes into it, and I think this is where I might take a little bit of umbrage with Sarah as a character, because I don't think she was as much realised as Ben. Because Sarah, Sera, would be derived from seraphim, I believe, and that all ties in with this sense of an angel kind of stuff. And I would say that her as a character does definitely fit this idea of like a pixie dream girl kind of thing. She is angelic in the sense that she allows Ben to do whatever he wants, and although I suppose she does have some limits, but I think it was more by the fact that, you know, she gets fucking sodomized by force, and to her it was almost like, oh well, okay, I'll just go home with my really sore asshole, take a shower, lie down, put on some makeup, and get back at it, kind of thing. It almost felt a bit too, well, I suppose unbelievable, really. It was very much that, it felt like a male fantasy kind of figure, because it was like she had sass, she was totally without inhibition, she's, you know, it kind of all fits this type of thing. It does kind of fit in the terms of that synopsis verdict, in terms of like, she does have that more vivacious outlook on life. She still, you know, wants to be part of it, which I kind of think might also suggest that she's just a total nymph, but okay. And yeah, Ben's is obviously totally the antithesis of that, where he just wants to die pretty much, and has nothing really keeping him going apart from the drink. And I think the only reason he would even say that is because he knows the drink is going to take him, you know, to the other side type thing. And so yeah, and I found it interesting as well, because at times you get quite vivid descriptions of what the booze is like in his system. Like, it will describe how it hits his stomach and it starts to go through his bloodstream, and he makes some quip about he's surprised that his blood even clots, like when he cuts himself, because of how much he must have thinned it out with with the booze and all this type of stuff. Whereas we don't really get that description when it comes to what Sarah goes through. We get this impression that, yeah, she's sore down there, and certain elements are painful. You know, sometimes when she has to have sex with someone, it will feel pretty bad, but it doesn't really go into as graphic a detail, I didn't think. And yeah, I suppose there was a somewhat dissociation between what she did for a living and, yeah, how she was in real life. So maybe we were getting more of how she was in her day to day, because though there are quite a few sex scenes and stuff, they're pretty brief most of the time, and due to her own unattached kind of manner, yeah, there's probably little to recall for her anyway, because it's just going through the rounds of a shift, let's say. So, and there were still some elements where it did add how it was kind of affecting her mentally. I mean, the disassociation in general was a kind of hint of how she really felt about what she was doing. And well, really, I mean, I actually viewed them more both as very self-destructive types who have this, they're drawn to the, well, sleazy and self-destructive side. I mean, I suppose if you read Flowers of Evil or something like that, like the poetry book, I think that's them in a nutshell, really. I mean, I just feel like they are people who were probably born into mostly, not necessarily poverty, but they weren't given too much chance in life, I don't think, and they've just found their comfort in what most people only indulge as a kind of pastime. So they are addicts, both of them, I would say. I mean, quite clearly, if that's, I mean, Sarah isn't to a drug, but she most certainly is into this idea of, I don't even think it's necessarily sex, but it is the kind of the independence you can kind of give her. She can be used, but really she's the one who gains from it in her own mentality type of thing, because she gets to do things by her own say, I suppose, or her own kind of like outlook on the world and that type of thing. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, the prose is interesting, I would say. Like, I actually thought it was going to be a bit more poignant. There were moments where I thought it was really nice, but there are also other moments where it uses this kind of odd techniques where O'Brien, I mean, would kind of like put a bracket to go to a past memory, but that would go on for quite a while, and then it would close bracket, and then obviously there's no bracket, so we're back in the present. And I thought, it's interesting, but it's a little bit fucking lazy. Couldn't you just change your past principle and then just make it obvious that we're going into a memory, instead of like doing this kind of cheap trick? Actually, I kind of felt like it was a bit like it's an unorthodox manner of trying to go into like a flashback or a memory or whatever. And then there were other little moments where it kind of would almost glitch in terms of how the prose, or how the thinking of Ben as a character was addressing things. I thought that added a little bit in terms of the nature of, say, the alcoholic mind, and it had a nice quirk to it. But overall, I sort of view it, and this is pretty cynical, but it's, I think everyone kind of thinks it, due to the fact that it became a big fucking movie, and that John O'Brien shot himself in the head so quickly after signing off the movie rights. It's very clearly about him. When I say that Ben is just committing suicide, I would say that this book is his suicide note. That's why you've got an angel of a whore kind of character, because it's almost like it's essentially him preparing for the, I don't want to say afterlife, but for death kind of thing. So that's what she kind of represents. I mean, I suppose if you were to really like analyze it, she does sort of facilitate his suicide as well, because she accepts him for what he is, but at the same time, because she's doing that, she's also sort of saying, it's fine, you can do this. She doesn't quite in the end, because Ben takes it into his own hands by hiring a completely different hooker and kind of rubbing it in her face. But I definitely got a kind of mummy issues type thing going on with that bit. But yeah, I mean, you could also look at it as, two people who are hopeless, and they know that they're hopeless, so they go on this kind of mini adventure to kind of bow out to existence together. And even though only one of them is really going to be going, in some ways Sarah's whole existence is, even though you could view it, I suppose, as positive in a kind of like it's life affirming. The only thing is, I don't really buy that, if I'm honest, when it says that in the synopsis. I'm just like, to me her existence is very akin to Ben's, because it's purely about self-destruction. I don't want to keep repeating that, but that's basically what it felt like to me. It wasn't affirming, it wasn't constructing, it was just a way of getting by and just kind of surviving, somewhat on our own terms, but I mean, those terms come at a price, and really I think, due to the nature of what she does, it's probably only a matter of time before she's either too old to continue doing what she does. She might still be able to continue with particularly perverted types or whatever, but she won't be able to get the clientele that she could have done when she's in her 20s and 30s. And B, someone will probably kill her at some point. I mean, Al would have done and possibly might do anyway, but the way his story was cut out of it, I just thought was a little bit almost like it got to a point where it was like, okay, I need to wrap this up, we need a bit of resolution here, we'll make it seem like it's all over, but who knows. I mean, you could definitely, he even goes through these like paranoid delusions, this particular gentleman, so you could kind of imagine that he would come back at some point. Trying to think of if there's anything else I'd really want to add. Oh, the alcoholism elements are very, very good, I would say, in terms of like how it describes it, especially in terms of the mentality that kind of goes on with it. The bits where it's like mentioning how often Ben falls over on his arse and like stuff like that was a little bit, well, repetitive. But again, I suppose his whole existence at that point is very repetitive. I mean, as soon as he wakes up, he's reaching for the bottle and stuff like that. So that became a little bit like, oh yeah, he's just literally everywhere he goes, he's just there to get shit-faced as quickly as possible. But there is a realism to it. You can definitely sense that it's, well, I'm pretty sure John O'Brien pretty much lived that life, at least in certain periods. But gay trouser shorts. Hey man, it's fucking hot. If I had a white shirt on, you'd be getting wet right now. I do kind of know what you mean, but do you not think that you wouldn't have got the enjoyment from their meeting had you not read about their lives beforehand? You know what I mean? The thing that stuck out to me is because having watched the film, which was admittedly quite a while ago, I'll have to say that I actually think the film's better, which isn't really a good thing when it comes to like measuring if something is a kind of classic or whatever. Because if the film does it, and the reason I think the film did it better is because it had more poignant moments where really I do think it probably should have started with Ben, because that's the kind of main character of all. Maybe John O'Brien didn't want that, really. Maybe he was saying that Sarah was the protagonist, but I don't think she was overall. Although I would also agree that they're kind of both, you know, the leads in it. But to me it made more sense, and I might be completely misremembering the film in fairness, but I was pretty sure that it was him heading to Vegas pretty much from the beginning, and then their paths cross, and then as their relationship develops, he knows she's going to go out and start doing her job kind of thing, and that's when she meets these teenagers who I'm guessing they're kind of like 16, 17, and yeah, they're the ones who basically beat her up and rape her. Or at least, I think in the film, one of them's a little bit, you know, retarded, basically, and they're kind of doing it for him, or that's what they claim. And then, yeah, he's the one who's actually the worst out of all of them. But it just added, it made sense. Like, I almost felt like if you took this particular manuscript and put it in the hands of certain other editors or whatever, they probably would have suggested, like, well, that needs to be later. Like, there needs to be, so we need to combine the kind of more tragic elements. I don't know. In the film, it makes sense that it waits for that, really. It's not bad that it's in the book early, because it does kind of give you an idea of just how savage this world that we're in is, but well, to be honest, it's not really anything different than what probably happens in fucking Vegas every night. But yeah, for me, it sort of took away from the fully rounded element of her character. It made her too literally angelic, I suppose, where she can kind of just go through anything. You know, she can get with a guy who's, I suppose, really, if you were to add more things about his alcoholism, it was surprising that he didn't like piss himself or shit himself and stuff like that a bit more often. To be honest, I mean, there is one bit where he wakes up with it and his head's in a urinal, and it mentions something about how at one point he would be totally ashamed, but now he's just like, no, he just doesn't care. He just gets up and washes, and then he's talking to some young barmaid, and then he's like smelling the piss that's still on his skin and all this kind of. It's almost so revolting as to be just kind of hilarious, because it's just like, God damn, man, you really have gone to the depths, kind of thing. And yeah, there's a few odd moments. There's sort of Bukowskian elements, I suppose, where it's like he's just in the bar and some floozy will come up to him and be like, hey, you want to take me out? You know, and all this kind of, and she's got a fucking man with her anyway, and like then he kind of like goes along with it, and then will end up getting in a fist fight just for the sake of fucking violence, you know. And then yeah, I don't know, I suppose it did make me want to watch the film again, because from what I remember, Nicolas Cage's performance in that movie is fucking unreal. Like, it's very, like, I could definitely see how he's shaped the character from reading the book. Like, it's like these moments where he's mostly fine, almost like out of it, to the point where he's like his head's elsewhere, but then he'll just snap. And we don't really get a lot of that in the book, but I think what Nicolas Cage found within it, and like how he built the character, he really brought it to fucking life, like insanely well. I think possibly even better than what the book describes, I would say, overall. But in terms of, I mean, I don't think the build-up can feel redundant if it had a payoff, can it? I mean, I do know what you're getting at in terms of it just felt like, I don't know, for me there's a lot of novels that do this where it's like, and maybe more novels of old especially, I mean this was published in the 90s or literally 1990, but that's still quite a while back, whereas, you know, it's this whole sense of like you've got to paint the picture of what's going on and all this type of stuff. That's all very well and good, but it would be kind of, there's other ways of doing it that can kind of make it more intriguing. Do we really need to know that, you know, Ben came from LA or how he got the money? It's kind of like we can explain that in very quick terms. It doesn't really need to be dealt with in a bigger sense, you know. I suppose it adds somewhat of a characterization or backstory or whatever you want to call it, but yeah, for me it was, I still thought it was very good overall. Like, it's had a poignancy to it that I thought is quite rare in novels, but it does utilize a very tried and tested, I mean, it's the drunk falling in love with the whore. Like that, these kind of stories have been done a million times before. Admittedly, it does somewhat subvert the trope, because he's not, you know, going, I can save her, you know, or anything like that, and she's equally not really doing the whole I can save him type of thing. It's much more about they're actually accepting each other for the pieces of shit that they are. I suppose hers is a bit more commendable than his, because he knows that he's going to die, and so does she. Whereas, the moment she shows that little bit of concern is the moment he turns around and hires a fat hooker to come round and basically, rub it in her face that they never actually fornicated. It was probably wise that they never actually made love or anything like that, because I don't think their relationship was about that. But it does still feel a little bit of a shame that they didn't at least have a fucking minute of that or something. But yeah, I don't know. I still thought it was probably the right choice overall. But yeah, for me, I'd have to re-watch the movie because I don't really remember exactly the linear structure, how much it really changes, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't think I'll be watching it anytime too soon, mind you, because remembering it is really fucking depressing. Probably more so. I mean, I suppose it's the Alcoholics equivalent of something like Requiem for a Dream in a way. Like it's got a lot of similarities. And I suppose, given the time that it came out, it almost maybe even set the kind of it definitely set a mark for kind of the transgressive pieces that followed after it, because it's got all of the elements in it. You got prostitution, alcoholism, violence, just these seedy type characters, that type, and the style is definitely of that type of ilk. I would say that it's got possibly more literary worth than the normal transgressive type pieces, but yeah, it's still most certainly that type of fiction. Well, I think what was the one so just for an example as to like, trying to remember what the quote was I put out, but it's like, at times like this he likes to think of his life as one big piece of performance art, not structured enough to be an actual play. It is full of irrationality and minuscule details, and can only be viewed from the inside out once by him. If he doesn't black out. He titles this episode "Pinching Pennies and Prostitutes, Frugal Fucking in LA." There's quippiness to the writing that I think works pretty well. But these moments, it's not like the whole novel's written like this. It does have different strides, different kind of styles from time to time. Some that are pretty damn good, others that I thought possibly could have been a bit better. So yeah, overall, I mean, he had talent, but then, as I think I was trying to say earlier, like, you've got to wonder, would this have as much acclaim if he didn't shoot himself? Because let's face it, most writers don't really gain any notoriety until they die, so it's only posthumously that suddenly people start to see it. And given the fact that he did it even before the fucking movie of his own thing, his own book, has been made, it just adds to it, doesn't it? Like the way Heath Ledger died before The Dark Knight came out. It's like it. Though I almost get annoyed with that, because it's like his performance is so good in that film. It's almost like a shame that there's that attachment of death to it. But still, it's there. And it does make people view it in a different way, I would say, overall. Possibly, and, since everyone's like a martyr in death, I think most people are prone to be more positive about stuff, knowing, that the person behind it is dead, basically. Like, it feels like you're, well, speaking bad of the dead, I suppose, if you don't give it praise. So I do think it's possibly overblown because of that. I think maybe if you are American and from the West Coast, then it probably would resonate with you a bit more. Like it definitely, I mean, I got that certain Americana sense of it. I think if you are from that particular place in the world, and you know you like a bit of this, or you like your prozzies, or just general type of stuff, then yeah, you would possibly get more out of it than your average European. Maybe, I don't know. Compared to other adaptations, how relatively faithful is the book's adaptation? I'd say very much so, but I think the film blends things that are spread out in the book, but makes sense to combine. But I can't. Yeah, I can't lie. I mean, it's been a long time since I saw the film, so I might even be misremembering it. And that's pretty likely, if I'm honest. I think I watched it when I was about 20 or something, so yeah. And there's been a lot of that since that time, so I'm pretty sure I would have forgotten. But yeah, maybe I'll review it if I watch it and do a kind of. I was thinking about doing comparison stuff at some point. So yeah, maybe that would be worth. Yeah, I agree. That's why I found it a bit odd that it could, like, right before he dies as well. Like, it just has this bit where she tosses him off. He's like there masturbating like a fucking baby, basically, like a drunk baby doesn't even know where he fucking is, and she's like, "Let me take care of that." You know, this is a tried and tested hand. I've been doing this for ages, and although it's kind of nice, like in a really weird, like intimate type way, and yeah, you felt it. I couldn't help but kind of take a step back and go, why is this included? I mean, the random moments, and he mentions this a couple of times with like just boners, like with the pimp. It's like at some point he's just got this fucking rage boner going on, like just constantly, like he can't satisfy it. And then at other times, even though Stumblebum Ben can barely get it up at any point, but when he does get it up, it's like the only thing he can think about doing is humping the nearest thing around, and it's just a bit like, huh, this is interesting. But yeah, it felt odd to me that it included this little element to it in a way, but what are you going to do? I might wrap it up there actually. I was thinking about, you know, closing things off a bit quicker. You should read City of Night by Recchi if you like this, better and more original. Okay, I'll put that on the list. I mean, I like this. I'll give it my judgment, I suppose. I'd say it's a 4-starer for me. I don't think it's quite. Yeah, it's not. Fear and Trembling. Yeah, that's. Well, I'm going to review it soon anyway, so I could save my thoughts. I thought it was decent, you know. I think it's a good little book. I thought it was refreshing in a sense that it felt like a book that knew what it was. and it wasn't trying to be anything more than that. So, and it's a good length. I think Amélie Nothomb is a good writer. I thought it was highly comical, but it's a very satirical piece, so there's not really much else needed in a lot of ways. Well, yeah, Patrick ain't here, so. And yeah, I mean, I can add a few things. I mean, it's basically, it's like a semi-autobiographical thing again, actually, if you are interested. And Amélie Nothomb is quite an eccentric character from what I can see. If you look her up, you kind of get that Edith Piaf kind of impression. I kind of thought of her as almost like a bargain bin Helena Bonham Carter, which might be a bit harsh, but I think she's a talented writer. I thought the humour in Fear and Trembling was very high, highbrow at times as well, like the cross-cultural thing. But basically she was a Belgian writer, but she was born in Japan, and later on in her actual life she goes back to Japan to be, I presume, a translator for some corporate company, as is what is told in the novel. And through a series of kind of culture clashes, but also this hierarchical Japanese system, she kind of blunders inadvertently and then is severely kind of punished and then designated to do the most menial and degrading of jobs as it goes on. And it's obviously satire, it's obviously very extreme and taking the piss, but it's because it's doing that, it's kind of highlighting a truth, I thought it was hilarious at times. Very funny. Yeah. And like I said, I enjoyed it because it felt like it knew what it was as a novel, and it didn't step out of the side of the mark in that regard. And it was funny, there were moments where it felt almost meta to me, because I did wonder, like, this whole novel's just basically been about her life inside this corporate setting. And then she acknowledges that as well and says, like, obviously there were other things going on, but for the sake and for my story, it's been more important to focus on this. There is a film out of it as well that actually looks somewhat accurate to the novel in terms of like the comedy and things like that. And yeah, there's some odd moments of poignancy, I would say, and I thought it ended really nicely, mainly because of the whole semi-autobiographical element, but it also had a term. I thought it because she has this relationship. Her main nemesis is another woman, Mrs. Mori, I think, and she is this stunning-looking Japanese woman. But yeah, some of the stuff she says about, like, the only choice for a Japanese woman is to marry or commit suicide, and she makes these really blunt observations and she details her reasons for it, and it's fucking hilarious for one thing. And there is a degree of truth to what she's saying, at least in the very I suppose generic way, or it's kind of like a criticism of the culture, but in a way that I don't think is ever malicious. I actually think it's quite obvious that she adores Japanese culture, but she is pointing out in terms of this like corporate setting and possibly the way that the Japanese view her as a foreigner, which I hear is, it's not exactly unknown that the Japanese are a bit, disrespectful of others who aren't Japanese and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, for me it was never in a way where I felt like it was being condemning. It's weird. Yeah. I think in the times that we're in, I saw something earlier, and I don't even know if it's true, but there's like this, it was a fucking meme, and it was talking about Rush Hour. You remember that film with Jackie Chan and fucking Chris, what was his name? I want to say his name was Chris Tucker. That was him. And the film's just, I think the first film's actually pretty shit, but I think the second one's good because it's really bad, but it's good because it knows what it is. But it basically had a fucking trigger warning thing at the beginning saying, like, the humor in this film and all of this is of a time that, you know, where these things were comical and like this is offensive now or something like that. And it's like, I don't know whether it was true, but if that is something that's coming up, it's like, wow, what the fuck is wrong with like Gen Z and all of that? It's just like they get offended so easily. And I did see one review like going on about like this particular book as if it's like really insensitive and like misappropriating and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, you really just don't understand satire, I think. And it's like, why are you taking something that, contextually speaking, is totally fine with what it's doing? It's like they have this tendency to see anything, like if I start saying this, like, oh, Chinese people are like this, or blah, 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 blah. They love eating anything they can get their hands on, dogs especially, or whatever. Then it's like, they might have more right to complain about that because I'm just saying it on a fucking stream or whatever. But contextually speaking, I'm talking about it in a way where she is talking about it because she lived that experience, you know? And it's so obviously, I mean, there's one bit where she talks about the reason it's called Fear and Trembling is because of a time past when you met the Emperor of Japan, it was considered courteous to be fearful and trembling, to quite literally be shaking in your boots type of thing. And because of the setting she's in and this hierarchy where she's told she's never going to speak to Mr. Haneda, the top dude there, because she is unworthy of even licking his shoes and all this type of stuff. I thought it was very funny, and I thought the ending really was a nice kind of touch to the whole nemesis story that went on, where she kind of felt like a kinship to this particular woman, and yet this woman is like a total bitch to her, like pretty much all the way throughout, to the point where she basically puts her on toilet cleaning duty, and she's not even allowed to, you know, talk to the other employees, and she's not allowed to do anything else. And yet then she kind of like, she does a similar thing what Bukowski does with Post Office, where he kind of talks about how he quits the post office and then writes the novel, and then you're like, oh, the novel you're reading. And yeah, it does a similar thing where, yeah, Amelie will go and write her book, her account of this particular event in her life, and then it ends with her receiving a kind of acknowledgement of that from this woman who she wasn't sure whether hated her or did actually have some sort of admiration. And then that's it. I thought it was a very nice way to end it, and probably an ideal way to end it, considering you've already used that autobiographical kind of trope, or played with it a bit. And it was nice to see that relationship of like, yeah, she was right, she did respect her. What did you guys think? I think I just waffled on fucking ages there. I'm going to have one glass of wine and then I'll poodle off. I think the thing that I just enjoyed about it quite a bit as well is the fucking woman could write, you know, as well. That was a big thing to me reading it. I was just like, she's using some really nice language here, and had a real skill for taking the kind of absurdity that you kind of go down. So as the more and more it goes on, the more the kind of the language becomes more and more kind of impolite as well. So it kind of starts playing with the setup that it has, where she's trying to be courteous and helpful and, you know, resourceful and all of that. And then it's like the more kind of backfires on her, the more she starts to kind of retaliate against it. But then she kind of flips it on their head of like, she kind of starts agreeing of like saying like, it's because I'm a Western woman, my intellect doesn't match your Japanese one, and all this kind of stuff. And then because that massages their ego, they're kind of like, you are right, Amelie, son, and all this kind of stuff. It was very funny. And it did add a few, just very nice little paragraphs and sentences, and it does play with historical relevance and all that kind of stuff, but that's fine. I think there was one part as well where she basically says that the Japanese have more in common with Nazi Germany than she does, or whatever, which I kind of thought was hilarious. But yeah, good book. And yeah, well, as for like when the next one will be, I'm not quite sure at the minute. I'll probably do a vote at some point. If you're not signed up to the mailing list, do that, because that's where I'm kind of keeping people abreast of what I'm wanting to do. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, I kind of would prefer to be doing this privately and then throwing it on this channel. So mainly because I think if you're interested in it, then yeah, we could have it as a kind of thing that we just do on the side, because most people who do this YouTube stuff and whatnot, if they're doing streams or book clubs, it's all part of their Patreon. I'm doing it for nothing and I'm getting no interest, so it's a bit like, okay, well, if there's not enough interest in it, then I might as well just be reading and doing normal reviews, you know. Maybe a different type of stream could happen at some point, or this one could change a bit, but you have to let me know. I suppose overall as well, I mean, I don't want to over egg Fear and Trembling, but I would say you could see a distinction in writing ability. Not to say that she's obviously a lot better than some of the ones we've read recently, but you can see a slight distinction. That could be down to education level, I don't know, but it could also be down to knowing what you want to say, and what type of novel you're putting together. I felt what was most impressive about Fear and Trembling is that it knew what it was, and maybe the same for Leaving Las Vegas, but Leaving Las Vegas could be shorter than what it is and you wouldn't really miss that much. I think I did watch Better Than Food, or I went over Better Than Food's review of it, and he said it was like perfect, and I was just a bit like, I just don't agree overall. I was actually almost surprised that he said that, because he mentioned something about there was no fat on the novel, and I thought, I think there is. Like most novels have that, you know, in a lot of ways, but to me there was elements of Leaving Las Vegas that, you know, the whole backstory with Al and the whole period where he's back is way longer than the conclusion that kind of happens with that felt a little bit half-arsed to me, but maybe that was kind of the point. I don't know. It's I only finished it today, so I don't know, maybe some thoughts on it might change. But to me, there were a couple of and the instances where Ben is inside a bar, because he's gone off to get some toilet paper or whatever, and of course he's got to go and have a drink before he does that. So I think once you've done that a couple of times, it's a bit like, yeah, we get it. We don't really need to keep visiting these things, Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I would have thought he could at the stage he's at now, surely he can say whatever the fuck he wants, but I mean, it's fair enough. I mean, that might have been partly why I said if you're American, you might be more partial to it because it might speak to you a little bit more. Because it is very American. Like, not going to beat around the bush a bit. Even though, given the fact that it's in Vegas and it has that kind of droll attitude towards stuff and whatnot. I don't know. But I don't know whether that plays a part in it or anything. But if something like this was set in, say, France or whatever, you'd have to change a few things about it, It wouldn't actually work, I don't think. But yeah, I don't know that one myself, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, I was a little bit surprised that he was so positive about it. I think I think I sit between him and you over it. Like, I think it's a very good novel, but I do think it's got flaws. And I suppose my main criticism of things these days is when things feel elongated for no reason. And I think mainly because there should be an aim to condense, You should be looking at things and really like maybe I'm taking the whole kill your darlings thing to the extreme, but I do look at most things, and unless there are 3 reasons why something is tied into a particular piece, then I don't think it's strong enough to make it into the final bit. Like, there needs to be more than one reason it's there, And for me, the character of the pimp only really had 2, and I just thought, if we left it and Sarah and what happens between her and Ben happens and the pimp never turns up again, would we miss that much? I would say no, overall. Like, I don't think it would make much difference. I might be wrong about that, in fairness, but yeah, I think I'll call it a night. I'll bring this back in, I don't know, a month, something like that. Put up a new, I mean, doing a poll and getting 20 odd votes and then a quarter of those people actually turn up to watch it. I don't know, it just feels a little bit like it's a pretty small club we got going on here. And I'm alright with that, but I do have to also think about doing other vids that will potentially be more beneficial. So yeah, I'm going to take a bit of a break from it, really. But did you see the article about the white guy who pretended to be a non-binary Nigerian? and deliberately wrote shit poetry, but still got 47 of them published. I didn't, but that's all I need to know. And yeah, I mean, maybe that tells you everything about like the industry in general these days. That's just, I mean, it's hilarious, but at the same time, it's like, man, the fuck is going on? I hope that's true. But yeah, we'll leave it there. Cheers for tuning in, guys, and cheers for reading it, all one of you. It's always a pleasure. And yeah, well, I'll be around sooner than you think, I imagine. It's just the way it is. Till next time, I'll see you later.